Hello, 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 and welcome. Welcome to the Live Fearless CEO Sit Down. My name is Lauren Hatch. For those of you who haven't met me before, I'm the CEO and founder of Live Fearless Media and LF Teams, and I've been in the marketing, media, branding, and entertainment worlds for the last 15 years. Actually, nearly 17. That's actually insane in my head that I am closer to 20 years than I am to 10. I still boggles my mind, and I say this once a week, every week. Welcome back to the CEO Sit Down. I know it's been a while. We took last week off due to some health issues on my end, and we took a month off because I was moving. Welcome to my new office space. For those of you who weren't with us 2 weeks ago, this is my new office. There is a lot of blank wall behind me and a lot of things not properly set up in front of me. Because this space, despite the fact that it is my office, is probably one of the last to get set up since we moved. I moved house and office in the same month, guys. So insanity has ensued. I am now on the other side of town, both with my office and with my home. And so I'm still getting out of boxes to this day. I mean, I literally set up a table and I have a painting to hang and I have an entire wall to design back here so you guys don't look at a white gray wall. It's been a crazy season, but I am back and hopefully, fingers crossed, will be significantly more consistent than I've been. But welcome to the CEO Sit Down. If this is your first time joining us for a CEO Sit Down, welcome. If this is not your first time, welcome back. For those of you who have been here before, you know the drill. Drop your questions in the comments below or head on over to my Instagram, Live Fearless CEO, and drop your questions in the question box there. If we don't get to your questions today, maybe we'll get to it in the future, or I do record shorts throughout the week to answer questions as well. So if we don't get to your question today, don't worry, maybe we'll get to it in a future episode, whether that's live or recorded. So I answer questions, anything from marketing and branding, business building, CEO, mindset, life. This is basically a catch-all place where you can ask me pretty much anything you want, and some of you do it. Ask me anything you want. I kind of invited that when I started this. We get some interesting questions. I admit there are some where I do heavy veto power. I do have the right of veto power. So ask your questions carefully because veto power usually comes with a block. So let's get started. We got quite a few questions this week, and I don't have nearly as much time as I would like today. So let's get into the questions. Oh, this is a good one we haven't answered in a long time. How did I become an entrepreneur? So I tell everybody, don't do what I did. Anybody who comes to me and asks me, like, how do I become an entrepreneur? I say, don't do what I did. I am the example of desperation becomes creativity because I was desperate. That's where Live Fearless started. I had never seen myself as an entrepreneur. When I started my business, I consistently thought I was either too young or too inexperienced because I was in my mid-20s at the time, and I didn't know I was starting a business. Let's be very clear. I did not know I was starting a business. I thought I was desperate for work. So I need to do a longer video on this at some point because Lord knows this is a very long story. But very long story short, I was fired from my job that I had at the time. I was doing communications and client services with UBS, United Bank of Switzerland at the time. And I was technically an analyst, but I'd been an analyst most of my young adult life, from 20 to 27 when I started the business. And I can tell you without fear of error, I did very little actual financial analysis. Most of the time, for those of you who don't know, finance is usually very slow to adopt certain types of technology and marketing and everything else. So that's a little background into that. And when they do start to adopt, they don't typically hire out entire teams. It's usually people internal to the company that become the source of whatever department or group is created to take on the task of learning these systems. Usually that is made up of the youngest people in the office, which are the analysts. Depending on what type of analyst you are. Admittedly, some financial analysts, like big time, like the guys you see on the news, those guys, those are not the guys I'm talking about. I'm talking about the new hires out of college who have a lot of experience with technology, or at least this was the case back in the mid 2000s, about 2010, 14-ish, when I was learning my skill set. So I was fired from that job. And I had to figure out something to do. So I did the thing that everybody does. I put out resumes. I went and got in contact with all my contacts. Went and did all the networking and the marketing of myself and did all the things. I submitted resumes galore every single day. I put cover letters out there. I went and I took coffee meetings. I did all the things you're told to do. And for a year, I sat unemployed. And I was going completely traditional marketing at the, not traditional marketing route. I was going traditional HR route, trying to get a job within a larger corporation because that's what I knew, right? I came from large teams, large political teams, large finance teams, large government offices. I never had worked as a contract person. I was an internal team member always. And I went a year of trying to get jobs and trying to get jobs and trying to get jobs, and nobody paid me. Nobody was willing to pay me. No one was willing to take me on an internal team. So I started looking at non-traditional jobs, things that might give me the opportunity to do marketing, branding, which was really what I'd done. That was what I discovered. I had realized in that time, despite the fact that my title said analyst, none of my skill set, well, not none of my skill set, that's not true. I knew comparative analytics. I knew how to run a spreadsheet like the best of them, like anybody else on Wall Street. But most of my skill set lent towards marketing and sales, and very little of it led towards analysis. So I had to make a choice. And because my larger skill set was over here, that's what I did. And so I started putting my skill set out there, hoping somebody would take me as like a temp or as a contract worker, something of that nature, part-time, anything. And so I started hiring people to help me get hired. And that didn't work either. This is still in that year, by the way, guys. This is still in that year where I'm unemployed. And I sat down with the HR manager. So a couple months before that, I'm so depressed. I need a job. I'm going to Starbucks to be a barista and not Burger King, sorry, McDonald's to flip burgers. I am that desperate for money at that point. And they wouldn't hire me either. And so I've now hired an HR headhunter kind of person. And I sit down with them and they look at me and they say, "We think you're unemployable." Knife, heart. I'm panicking, by the way, guys, because the reality is at this point, I am 27, almost 28 years old. And I'm being told in my mid to late 20s that I'm unemployable. I'm not like past my prime. And I hadn't done anything wrong that got me fired, right? The reason I was fired was a completely legitimate reason. Which was I didn't pass my Series 7. If you don't know what that is, it's a financial licensing exam you have to pass in order to have the job I had. And, or at least that's what UBS required. Technically speaking, the job I had didn't require a 7, but they wanted me to have a 7. That was their requirement. And I failed the exam. And it was a requirement for my employment. I was fired because I didn't pass the exam. It is what it is. By the way, if you look up the Series 7, at the time, I don't think this is the case now because they've changed the Series 7. But at the time, the Series 7 was the most failed professional exam in all of professional exams. So it was not uncommon for people to fail this exam. And so, unfortunately, it was a part of my employment. I lost the job. There was nothing I could do about that. I hadn't done anything bad. It was just the situation being the situation, and it sucked. And unfortunately, with all the confusion in my resume, I said before, like all my skills were in marketing and branding and sales, but my titles said analyst. And so with all the confusion and the backgrounds in my skill sets when I had web development and marketing and social media and all these things over here. And while I could run a spreadsheet like the best of them, I wasn't a top analyst in New York. I was never going to be because that's not what the companies had been using me for. And I had to figure out what to do. So I realized, okay, so traditional internal to a large corporation isn't going to work anymore. That's not working. I can't get these temp agency, part-time agencies to hire me either on contract. That's not working. So I've got to go out on my own. That's like, I don't know what else to do. I guess I'm going out on my own. So I took a sheet of paper and wrote down every skill I'd ever developed, everything I ever knew. And I put it on one really crappy webpage, And I started putting out offers to nonprofits, to anybody to for-profits, to anybody who give me the time update, guys, anybody. And I didn't realize at the time I was building a business. I had no idea what I was doing. I just needed work and I was desperate. And so that's what I did. I went out with offers that literally were, I'll work for 30 days for free. If you like me, you keep me. If you don't, no harm, no foul, you walk away with the work. And it took a minute. It didn't happen instantaneously. The conversation that happened where I was told I was unhireable happened in September. The first contract did not come in until that following January. 13 months after I'd been fired, guys. Actually, no, 14 months after I'd been fired. 14 months because I was fired in November. That was my reality. That was what I was looking at. That was my situation as it stood, and I had nothing I could do about it. And other than just keep pedaling and hoping and wishing. And so I did. And it was insane. But eventually we got there. And most of building Live Fearless Media, being an entrepreneur, LF teams, the offers I've put out there, the different things I've done, was not because I wanted to build a business. It was because I got desperate enough to say, this isn't working. So I need another option. The option is not I'm unemployable. That was never going to be the answer, and that was never going to be my option because I was 28 years old. You can't just stop working and never work again at 28. I know some people believe you can, but that's not real reality, right? Unless you have some sort of like major trust fund to back you up, which I didn't have. And I had 40 cents in my bank account at the time. Literally 40 cents. That's how desperate I was because I had 40 cents and no way to earn an income. And luckily, some family, my mother specifically, took massive pity on me and took me back in and helped me get through that time because I don't actually know how I would have gotten through that time without her. There would be no way. She paid my bills, put a roof over my head, took care of me time and time again because I was down and out without a choice. And so I made the choice to not wallow in it and build something. I did not know I was building a business. It wasn't until 2019. So this is 2017, guys, when this is all going down. 2017 going into 2018. 2017 September. So 2016 November, I lose the job. 2017 September, almost a year later, just short of 2 months short of, is when I have the conversation with the headhunter that says you're unemployable. January 2018 is when I signed my first contract. Actually, no, I didn't even sign a contract at that point. That was the first 30 days. February 2018 is when I signed my first contract. So I went a year and 4 months with no income. Thank God for my mother, because I don't know many who would put up with the kind of crap she put up with from me. But that was what it was. So yeah, it was desperation, 100% desperation. And I will do a longer video on the history of that and the desperation of that time. If you all are interested, if you're interested, drop a comment below and I'll make that video in the coming weeks. I really actually should, because I don't think I've actually done a how this all started video in years. I think the last time I did was we were still in COVID lockdowns. I should do that. I should do that for you all. We'll do that in the coming weeks. All right, let's get to another question. But that you can see why I tell people not to do what I did now. Because I had no money, no idea, and I really wasn't intending to build a business. Like, go into this intentionally. One is my biggest piece of advice, because it's really, really hard. And so if you are not intentionally wanting it, it won't work. I went through a lot of heartache and pain because I wasn't intentional about it. Two, don't do it with no money. If you can, like, some of you are going to do this because you're desperate enough and you have to. You have no choice but to do it and make it work. Most, I'm going to tell you, should do this because of the fact that they want this. This is a very hard job to do if you don't want it. You got to drive, you got to start, you got to push, because especially in the beginning, you're not going to have anybody hold you accountable other than yourself. And then don't do it without money, like, and resources. I tell people all the time, if you have a full-time job right now, do this as your part-time gig. Do it as something that can help train you up over time if you can. If you're like me and you don't have the job, go out and build anyways. Try to get a job while you're building, by the way. That's a really good idea if you can. But if you have a full-time job, don't just quit it day one. It's the biggest piece of advice I can give somebody. Don't quit at day one. You do not have to get to a place where you have to cover all your income, because some of you out there have more income than your expenses. But I would say get your savings secured, like as in have 2 to 3 months of emergency funds, and then your credit cards or debts or whatever debt you have mostly paid down, the exception being like maybe a house or a car. By the way, I'm not one of those people that believes in don't carry debt. I have seen debt do some great things. You just have to be smart about the way you carry debt. Last but not least, get to a place where what you want to do is just get to a place where your income from your business covers your expenses, because you don't want to be in a place where you're scrambling. Which actually leads me to my next question. I have a question here about working on Live Fearless Media and only working on Live Fearless Media. So have you ever only worked for Live Fearless Media, or have you had multiple jobs at once? When I started Live Fearless Media, this was all I had. I was desperate. I had nothing else. That has not been the case the whole time I've had Live Fearless Media. I have sworn to myself I will never give it up. There will be a day probably when I'm too old to do this. Or maybe come a day where God says to me to give it up or whatever. Like that may happen one day. But for me, it's been a season. There have been seasons where this was my only focus. This was my only thing. And then there have been seasons where Live Fearless Media wasn't as strong. And I've had to take part-time gigs or temp work or other work. And because I had Live Fearless Media underneath it and the resume I built from Live Fearless Media, I've been able to get those jobs now. At one time, I couldn't. Now, people like to hire me. Who knew? So I have taken part-time internals. I have been parts of teams. I've built teams for people and walked away. I've been kind of the stabilizing unit in a lot of marketing teams in the last couple of years as marketing has shifted. So I've worked anywhere from just Live Fearless Media at times to I've had 4 jobs at once, just because of the season I was in. It just depends on where you are. I've sworn I will never give Live Fearless up for anything. If I have to turn it into a part-time gig or into weekend work and be a weekend warrior, I will do that. If that is what I'm asked to in that season where God is placing me, I will do it. However, I won't just throw it away. I won't. And I've done a lot of creative things to keep Live Fearless Media up and running when we were in a bad season, because it hasn't all been good. There have been seasons where I've made 6 figures in income, and then there have been seasons where I made $9,000 all year. So it all depends on the season. And one of the great things about building a business is you become so flexible in your skill set, you can slip in almost anywhere. And you also, because you've gotten used to selling yourself when you build a business, getting an HR manager, selling yourself to an HR manager is probably the easiest thing you will do. Because it's a lot easier to sell yourself to an HR manager than it is to get somebody to pay you 6 figures in a year. Let me tell you, it's a lot easier. I've been there several times. So it's just a matter of getting in the doorway, which is not always the easiest right now, just because of the world being the way the world is. So something to think about. Oh, this is a good one. Are you concerned about the futures of marketing agencies with the advancements in AI? No. Short answer, no. I'm not concerned. Well, for multiple reasons. One, I use AI in my agency. I use a significant amount of AI in my agency. If you see right now, actually in the background of this, I have a research report running while we're talking. I'm actually not joking. If you could see my Claude right now, there is a research report running because I need to know some legal information because I'm talking to a lawyer about some changes in the business, and lawyers speak one language, I speak another. And so I have this covering all the information and converting it into my language set so I can understand. Does it get 100% right? No, but I get at least the basic information. So when I walk in with the attorneys, I can talk with them fluently and not make a fool of myself. So I use AI in that. I use it in my creation process. I use it in brainstorming. Actually, I don't use it so much in brainstorming. I do it a lot in research. Anything that is a repetitive task, like for instance, if I have a template for something that I was hand inputting before, I use the template and I have the AI agents make new versions of that. So I use it for repetitive tasks that just eat my time. And so that's how I've used it. I've also learned over the years how to use AI agents. I have a significant background in technology, guys. This is part of the reason why I have used AI agents so significantly. It's just because I learned to type when I was in second grade, touch type, like don't look at your hands kind of typing when I was in second grade. By third and fourth, I was learning to program. So, and by the way, guys, that's in the 90s. Kid you not. I didn't hit middle school until the 2000s happened while I was in middle school. So, for me, technology has been a part of my life my entire life. So AI has not been this scary thing. It's just been there. And I know I'm pretty lucky. Most of the older millennials don't love AI, don't love technology the way some of the younger millennials and Gen Z do. I happen to have it in my household and in my schools at a very young age. So I've been lucky enough to grow up with this background of knowing these different things. I've been coding literally since fourth grade. So AI is not a scary thing for me. And it's also it shouldn't be a scary thing for marketers. Now, what we are doing on a day-to-day basis has to change. It's not the traditional rigmarole of marketing. We become more influential on the strategy side as marketers than we do on the actual creative side, creation side, like as in making the thing, producing the item, whether that's an ad, whether that's a video, whether that's a whatever, that becomes more AI based, not all AI based, because even the AI companies themselves will say they still need humans, right? I got somebody contact me the other day about literally hiring somebody to grade AI outputs. So they know, the companies themselves know they still need humans involved in checking the outputs, in making sure they're correct, in potentially editing outputs, both graphic, video, and text-based outputs. Also, when you use it for things like data entry and things like that, checking the inputs and the outputs, that is a human-based process you still have to be involved with if you have AI. So AI just makes the process different and it makes it faster. And the willingness to adopt it is going to tell you whether or not your agency is still going to exist. If you have a marketing agency or you are like me and do agency work, if you refuse to adopt and adapt, And I do know some who are refusing to do that. In a few years, you will be obsolete, in my opinion. But if you are willing to adopt and adapt, that transition of integration, making your process faster, making it easier, it saves you time, it saves you money, it saves you expenses, and it makes you more efficient at your job. But it also means that, like, the way you're working has to transition. It's not just, hey, we're getting rid of graphic designers, which actually I don't think is happening, but that's what people say. We're getting rid of graphic designers. We're getting rid of videographers. We're getting rid of this person or that person or the other person. You still need people, first of all. I'm a big believer in that. Second of all, what is happening is the way we do the work has transitioned. If you're willing to shift the way you do the work, you're golden. Your agency will be fine. The things you talk about, how you talk about them, when you talk about them, all those things, better, good, you're fine. If you're not willing to shift and change, then you're going to be in trouble. And I do find that there are certain types of agencies that serve certain realms that are more hesitant to adopt. So certain nonprofits, especially those who do church and ministry, agency-based work for church and ministry, I see them the slowest to adopt and adapt. I would tell you now, start sharpening your skill set if you like serving those communities, because it makes a huge difference. All right, I'm going to do one more, and then I've got to cut off for the day because it's been a long day and all my answers have been super long. So I think we're probably going to cut this into a couple videos instead of the way we've been doing it. Let's see. Ooh, this one's good. I really want to start a business, but everybody tells me I'm nuts. Okay. Here's the thing. You're going to hear from everybody and their mother who you ever interacted with, your family, your friends, people that barely know you, that this is a bad idea. Here's the thing I know, and most people know, in all honesty, this is not a secret. Starting a business is risky. There's a reason why earlier when I was talking about having multiple jobs that I keep. Most of them are temp jobs, but I've had up to 4 jobs at once. There's a reason for that, right? It's because this world is risky. There will be times it pays you real well, and there will be times it doesn't pay you at all. And that is 100% based on factors that you cannot control. There are things you can control in business, but in all honesty, guys, you have very little control on whether this rises or falls. A lot of business building is faith and luck. It's a good idea plus faith and luck. That's it. And willingness to do the work, in all honesty. Willingness. You have to be willing. And I think people out there look at this world and they see the rates, right? Especially your family. I'm going to speak to the family piece first, and then we'll go to friends and just people who barely know you. Let's talk about family. Majority of us, not everybody, majority of us, our families love us. And they grow extremely concerned when we do risky things. And it's not just the fact that they are concerned about your income, they're concerned about you mentally and emotionally. And there is a very strong chance, based on the numbers, it crashes and burns at some time. Now, some of the crashes will be bigger than others. Some are rebuildable, some are not. Rebuildable, by the way, I say is a mental thing, but I've also never hit a crash that was so bad that I didn't have something to build off of. So there might be a crash that is unbuildable. I don't know. I've never experienced it. But there will be a point where it crashes and burns. There will be a point where you go from a 6-figure month to 0 the next. It happens. And it's not uncommon. If it was uncommon, we wouldn't see the failure rates in businesses that we see here in the United States. In fact, globally, right? Everybody thinks that if they build a business, they're going to have multi-millions. The reality is less than 7% of businesses make $1 million. So that's 93% of businesses sit at 6 figures or less. The reality is the failure rates, 60% of businesses fail. 50% of businesses fail within 5 years. 80+% fail within 10. I forget the exact numbers, so don't quote me on that. But the failure rates are high enough that they grow concerned, and family is concerned about you and the risks you're taking. So your family, they're not going to understand. They are going to think you're nuts, but they're probably going to express it in a way where it feels like they're being super negative when it's really out of concern. Now, admittedly, I had both sides of the coin. I had family who did it out of concern, and then I had family who intentionally were not helpful. We'll leave it at not helpful. That's a story I'm not going into. But anyways, so it really depends on your family, but majority of the people I've encountered over the years, when their family weren't supportive, it was usually because they were concerned. Okay, so that's family. Friends, and people who don't know you. Okay, first of all, let's go to people who don't know you, and then we'll go to friends. Why do you care what somebody who barely knows you thinks? We all care about what people think for some reason. And in all honesty, I find myself in this loop all the time too. Don't let it go. Like, it's not worth it. Not worth your time, not worth your effort, not worth your stress. The random person on social media making a comment about how you're this, that, and the other, or how you're full of yourself, or how women out there, we get comments about how we look. We're either too big, not big enough, this, that, and the other. Like, who cares? Make them comment. Let them comment. First of all, ignore them. If they get vile, block them. And in all honesty, all they end up doing, the algorithm doesn't care whether the comments are positive or negative. They just care if they comment. So let them comment and ignore it. If they get vile or they get rude in a way that, like, set your own boundary line of what that looks like. I have certain like boundary lines of, if you get crass with me, if you get overly intense with me, if you make any comment about my like physicality in a sexual way, like immediately no. Immediately no. You're getting deleted, you're getting blocked. Don't care what platform you're on. And I have a list of things, and when I see those kind of comments, I delete and block. But for the most part, I just don't care. You can disagree with my ideas. You can disagree with my opinions. You can disagree with anything with me. I don't care. And sometimes, in all honesty, there have been a couple of people who've like kindly come with the disagreement, like actually come with a debate and a conversation where I sit there and I go, oh, that's something to think about. But if you just come at me with rude cross comments, then yeah, I'm not responding. I have no time for that. And you have to set where your boundary line is with that. Some people, the minute it gets negative, just for their own mental health, it's not good. So they delete and block. Some people have a lot of leeway. Like I have a lot of leeway. You get into certain types of commentary, I'm going to delete and block you. But for the most part, I just don't care. All right, friends. If there's one thing business will do, it will teach you who are really your friends. Most of your friends, and I'm not saying like you have to abandon them just because they are not the type of friends you thought they were. Most of your friends are not going to be the type of person you need to be in order to have a business. In order to have a successful business, you yourself have to develop into the type of person that has a successful business. This is a person you are embodying. Your friends, some of them will understand, but most of them won't. Now, I'm not saying you have to abandon them over this. There are friends at every stage of life, and some of them will stay your friends forever, even though you just aren't the same type of people. And then some of them, unfortunately, will fade into the background. But this is the reality of that world. Because you become somebody, you embody a person who is drastically more than the person you were when you became friends with these people. They don't know how to deal with that mentally and emotionally. You do, because you've repped yourself for it, because you've been through the process, because you've grown into the person you needed to be in order to have the business. But they haven't. They're still, you're here, they're there. And knowing these factors, because there is that distance between who you were, you're going to have grace for them, or you're going to have to choose to walk away. And some people will cheer for you and they will buy from you and they will support your process and they will be your friends for life. But some people, unfortunately, are never going to get it. And you yourself have to choose how you're going to deal with that. For me, it was a grace giving exercise for most of my friends. It was a understanding, look, I thought, like, I had several friends who were significantly involved in businesses that I supported, right? They were the decision makers. And so I thought, when I go sell them, they're going to buy from me, they're going to support me, they're going to this, they're going to that. They didn't. In fact, they barely gave me the time of day in a couple cases. I had one person who allowed me to come in and pitch, but all the others were like, oh no, like we see where you're going with this, but we're not interested. And so I decided to use grace, because they saw one version of me. Because I actually had a talk with one of these people that completely flat out rejected me on this one recently, a couple months ago now. Like, what was the deal at the time when I first started the business? Why? And they were like, I knew you as Lauren Hatch, this person, and you were Lauren Hatch, this person. And I was still looking at the old one. And now they see me as a very different life. I actually don't serve. I don't serve that particular industry as clients anymore, because this was a political person. And I don't serve in politics anymore in any capacity. And this person looked at me, and she was like, I saw the old you who was always internal to teams, always this, always that, not the leader. And she actually regrets it. But some people get to that place where they see their view of you changes and they understand. Some of them won't. And you have to decide how you're going to deal with that. And you're going to have to decide how much grace you're going to give them. For me, it was some of these people I gave a lot of grace, and they stayed in my life, and it was great. And then some people, it became really toxic really fast, and we're no longer in contact. But you have to decide with each where your boundary lines lie, where you feel okay, where you're going to give grace. That's a very individual thing. I can't tell you how to do that or not to do that. And eventually you'll get to a stronger place. Trust me. And by the way, if there's anything business building will do, is you end up in rooms where you start networking and meeting people and doing all these things. And when you do that, here's the really good news. You make a whole new set of friends. And usually you make a whole set of friends that actually understand it. Because especially if you network with other business owners, there is no better cheerleader than other business owners. Some of them are very red ocean-y, like competitive based. If you don't know what red oceans are, it's basically like the really competitive fields where we're all sharks. But a lot of us, majority of us, are very blue ocean minded, meaning blue oceans really are the idea that you build something where there's no competition. But I also look at it, this is not what blue oceans are, but this is my personal opinion with blue oceans. Blue oceans are a win-win situation. That there is enough to go around to all of us. There are opportunities for all of us. And the majority of people I know, especially the most successful, believe that there are opportunities for anybody out there. So you start having those friends where it's like, it's not a matter of competition, it's a matter of opportunity, and finding opportunity and seeing opportunity and finding patterns and building patterns and doing things that build each other up. And I find that in the entrepreneurial community, especially the most successful, that's the mindset they approach with. And those are the friends you gain during that process. But you kind of have to get through the process to get to those people, because it is a journey and a half. But I will say entrepreneurs are probably the most welcoming group of people I've ever met in my life, because very few of them are in this space where it's like, I'm going to take you out. It's more of a, I've been through this crazy process, now let me share. There's a reason why everybody hates the self-education space these days, right? Everybody hates the courses and everything else. There's a reason why so many entrepreneurs have done that, right? They have gone the journey. They have taken the 10 years, the 30 years, the whatever, their years of experience, and put it into these courses. People don't like it, but the reality is they did that because they wanted a way to give people the opportunity to do the same thing. That's why the course world took off. You don't like it, but it's the truth. Unpopular opinion. But it's the reason also why so many are doing it, right? Not just like the small business owners, but the big name guys are doing it too. Why? It's not just for the dollar bill. I will tell you that. As much as so many people will turn this into, it's another money play, people just want money from us, blah, blah, blah. No. Yes, entrepreneurs like to make money. Let's get very real. Entrepreneurs like money. But it is not the defining factor, because if it was the defining factor for most entrepreneurs, most businesses would fail. I'm just saying. Most of those big businesses, I'm not talking about the small business. I'm talking about the big businesses. They would fail because we know from extensive research, 98% of Fortune 500 companies believe in a mission beyond the dollar bill. Those are the 500 biggest businesses in the United States of America today. 98% of them believe you have to have a mission beyond the dollar bill. If the biggest businesses in the country believe in a mission, they believe in networking, they believe in relationship beyond just a dollar. Maybe they make choices beyond just a dollar, and maybe you need to make relationships beyond just a dollar. Just saying. I've now gone off on an entire tangent. We've spent quite a bit of time together. But anyways, if you didn't get your question answered today, do not worry. Drop it in the chats. We will address them here on our different social media feeds. We'll answer them in the comments, or we may move it to next week's lives. If you want to join us, it'll be next week, Thursday, 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. See y'all.